So will you be able to get it up for me?
Sorry, what's your question? Sorry.
The presentation.
Oh, okay. I actually don't know. Colin is doing this. Sorry. Sorry about this, guys.
Like Bill Gates when technology always goes against me. But before we begin, I just wanted to say it's a fantastic pleasure to be back here. I met Aidan and Jim yesterday in town. I happened to bump into them. And I was reminding them of the fact that when I graduated from UCG, I was supposed to do the HDIP, and in fact got rejected for the HDIP because my application was late. So I went over to the marketing department to see if they'd let me into that program. And so this incredible twist of fate that I did the marketing program and so set me on a trajectory which has been core to my career, and so I owe a huge amount to both Jim and Aidan for the fact that they took me into the marketing program when I had been rejected elsewhere. Otherwise, I could probably have had a tremendous career in teaching, but probably not half as much fun. But when I reminded them of this yesterday, Jim and Aidan also reminded me that any modicum of success in my career is probably due to my first employer, Jerry Barry. Because I started at Cashback and I worked with Katrina O'Farrell and Orla Murray, and we had a number of great years working at Cashback. Trying to get cashback into every single retailer in the country, so it was a fantastic start. And so from there I headed to London, and I've been travelling ever since, so I'm a bit of a gypsy. Fantastic to be back in Galway, just wonderful to be able to take and spend some time with my mum. So anytime anybody ever wants me back here, I'll come. So So I want to start off really in looking at where marketing is going and what it's going to be like by 2020. And the position I want to take is that actually more has changed in the marketing function in the last 5 years than in the previous 20. Most of you are carrying one of these, and from my perspective, I get real-time news alerts. So consumers are getting information on their mobile devices real-time, immediately. In addition, we are curating and we are tabulating all of our information on our news sites from Twitter feeds, from Facebook. They're taking a predominant position over news feeds that are coming from traditional channels. If you think about email, okay. If you think about email, we are in any form of direct mail. What we're finding is that most of the consumers today are rejecting it. We are either filtering it to such an extent that it ends up in the trash before you actually get to see any of it, or indeed we are, if it's coming in direct mail format, we're putting it straight in the bin. So the notion that we are actively seeking ways to ensure that advertising and direct ways of communicating with us as audiences is really in the past. 86% of the online population in North America currently will say that they find ad blockers. So with the advent of Netflix or Hulu, we can watch content and we can stream information when we want, where we want, and how we want. And so as a result of that, conversely, big data, and one of my major clients is IBM, and IBM really focuses on big data in order to ensure that not only can they target you as a demographic, but they will target you as an individual. So looking at your behavior online as a way to ensure that the messages that they are targeting at you are very specific to how you behave online, and monitoring specifically what you are doing. So as a result of that, and I thought it was really interesting when the iPhone 6 was launched that it caused quite a lot of controversy in the advertising community in the US, because it comes already with an ad blocker built in. So instead of opting into an ad blocker, you have to actually opt out. So I even read recently some research done by The Guardian, which suggested that of the 350,000 messages targeted at Londoners on a daily basis, the retention rate is almost zero. So from my perspective then, what I wanted to look at was the 4 key trends that are going to take us from where we are today to 2020. My notion of disruption is really around, I think human behavior is still the same. How we consume information and how we want to engage with content remains the same. However, the notion of marketing, advertising, and communication is the piece that I think is the element that is under major disruption. Text100 as a PR agency, as a global PR agency, we have shifted our emphasis away from traditional communications and traditional PR, and we're looking more specifically at paid, owned, earned, and social or shared. And so we're rebranding the agency, and we are hiring a whole new set of employees based on skill sets that are specific to paid, owned, earned, and social. Really looking at how we can develop people and build brand campaigns that are integrated, and integration is key here. So from my perspective, the four trends that I wanted to look at are really those that I think will take us through. The first one is the attention economy. I think with all of this, the specific element that brands are looking for is direct engagement with their consumer or their stakeholders. And stakeholders now are both internal and external to their brand. With a very, very clear understanding that the strongest and best ambassadors for your brand are actually your own people, or people who have experienced your brand in a positive way. So for that reason, we did quite a lot of research internally within Text100, and a lot of our clients are very familiar with the original sales funnel in terms of understanding not just what channels will communicate effectively with their stakeholders, but at what stage are they engaged with a brand. From our perspective, the notion of a sales funnel that goes from awareness through to purchase actually probably needs to be debunked. Because in reality, we have a much longer engagement with our stakeholders that starts, sure, from awareness to consideration. But the holy grail is that after engaging with a brand and after having an interaction, and that can be, if it's a political election, that can be a vote, but some interaction and action that you take with a brand, from that point forward, the most important element of a brand engagement comes afterwards in the degree of confidence that consumer has in your brand, and then ultimately, are they going to be a happy customer? Are they going to be somebody that are an advocate on behalf of your brand or a detractor? So major emphasis put on the notion of after sales, if you like. So if you take that as the fundamental premise of our planning and how we start to build campaigns on behalf of clients, then you can begin to see that these channels that we use in order to target customers at different stages of their client engagement or their brand engagement begins to change. And so at the point of broad awareness and consideration of a brand, you're more likely to trust somebody who's a peer, somebody else who has had an experience. So for sake of argument, if you are deciding, I want to go on a holiday and I'm not sure where to go, so you throw it out on Facebook and you say to people, give me some feedback on who has been where. So at that stage, you're looking for your peers to actually give you feedback. Once you get into this consideration and intent, now I've decided I'm going to go to America, and now I've decided I'm actually interested in maybe an urban environment like New York. Then you start to use channels such as media, authorities typically, somebody who has a specialist information, a specialist knowledge of the specific thing that you want to know about. As we get into action and actually engaging and booking, or indeed making a purchase, at this stage, the channels that are most powerful are actually owned. So if a brand specifically is a self-publisher or their website, that's the point of engagement with your consumers at the stage of action. Here is the after sales, right? So the degree to which they feel confident, I made the right decision, I made the right purchase, I'm really happy with the product, it gets reinforced. You want them to go out and actually start to talk about it, because they're better brand ambassadors for your brand than your own marketing department is. So here, what we're driving at is this notion of integrated. What's core to this campaign, or any campaign from a marketing perspective, is a consistent narrative. really understanding what your brand is, who you stand for, and critically for this millennial generation, what are your values, and to what extent do you live the values, both in terms of you as an employer as well as the engagement with your consumers. When I started in the industry, I felt that a lot of my clients really wanted us to create an image for their brand. They could, behind the image, they could actually stand back and really undertake business practices that were not representative of the image that we were asked to create. It's impossible to do that now because the degree of transparency as a result of online engagement is prolific. So from my perspective, this is a fantastic time to be in marketing communications because now we're being hired to truly look at what a company stands for, who their target audience is, and why should anybody care? So integrated communications and integrated marketing is the first key trend. The second one I wanted to look at was just this notion of, okay, so if we've got our campaign up and running, and we have an integrated communications program. It spans the entire business, regardless of how global or how local the company is. It's really tough to cut through the noise. Think about it, 6,000 tweets per second. There are 20 hours of video uploaded on YouTube per minute. Online, we're spending more and more time daily online than we have been historically. And people are spending 20 minutes to a half an hour on Facebook every day. Granted, these are US statistics, but I would imagine that we're finding similar patterns in behavior and online behaviors here in Ireland and in Europe as well. We're finding in some markets like India, readership is going up, but that's much more to do with literacy. China, one of my core markets, is leapfrogging any form of early adoption into very much more sophisticated ways of online engagement. So we're living in a 24/7 news cycle. So I feel honestly right now, you cannot assume that when you finish work, if a story has broken, that you have any hope of that story not escalating overnight. So monitoring is key. For those of you who are familiar with a PR woman who I knew quite well, who tweeted on her way to South Africa that she was concerned about getting AIDS. By the time she landed 12 hours later, the story had entirely gone viral, and it's one of those really classic stories that you hear of how you have to be monitoring constantly for crisis to occur. Now the way we do this is it has multiple facets. One is we, with some of the clients, will adopt very sophisticated technology in order to have dashboards to monitor what's happening online, and so they can spot a crisis almost before it happens, based on behavior. We as a company also have a less sophisticated way, but it's also very effective, where we follow the sun. So with some clients, we will have a team who will start monitoring news in Asia. They'll pass to the London team. The London team will pass to New York and then over to San Francisco. So we literally have coverage 24 hours a day. But the other piece about this that I think is important in monitoring news and in monitoring what's going on is that there are so many tools out there now that are actually free, and these are just some examples. So these are what we call freemiums, where you can get basic monitoring of your own company, the topics that are of interest to you, and perhaps what your competitors are doing. But the other piece about cutting through the noise is it's not just 24/7 news monitoring, but it's also the opportunity to news jockey on something that's going on, is how to get creative in a way that you can take your brand above the noise and begin to think about ways to cut through. And we've seen some great examples of these, and everybody talks about Oreos last year during the Super Bowl. When they sent out the tweet during the blackout to say you can dunk your Oreos in the dark. And I have had so many clients who've come to us and said, can we do something like that? And the interesting thing about the Oreo team was that they had a creative team literally locked in a room for weeks in advance of the Super Bowl, coming up with every possible thing that could happen. So they were actually ready, and within seconds were able to distribute that tweet, which obviously went viral and was really effective. But the other example that I just wanted to share with you today is actually happened about a month ago, and you may well be familiar with it. I mean, Jonathan mentioned it earlier. So this was a very, very clever tactic by Burger King to suggest to McDonald's that in line with Peace One Day, that they would come together, two competitive brands, put their differences aside and make one hamburger called a McWhopper. So, just a really, really cool idea to raise brand awareness for both their brands. But what was clever about it is they aligned it with Peace One Day, which was a much greater cause and an opportunity for them to really back initiative that is social in nature, but also something very relevant to their target audience. So this is the video, and I'll just talk a little bit about it there's no voiceover. Yeah, don't worry. It's all right. So I'll be the voiceover. That there was music and a voice to that, but basically the challenge that they had set out, as you can see, and they got Jeremy Gilly engaged, who is the director of Peace One Day, and it was literally, without ever speaking to McDonald's, was just literally saying to them, throwing down the gauntlet, let's put our differences aside and let's develop this hamburger together. It was huge. They took out New York Times ads, so advertising still works, I suppose. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, they just really made a huge effort to create awareness in the US around this notion that they would do this together. What was and everybody in my industry was fascinated, because what we were waiting for was what would McDonald's response be to the challenge. And I don't know who was advising Steve Easterbrook, who is the CEO of McDonald's, but it was a very poor response. So he developed an open letter and said, quite frankly, I think in terms of peace, as two competitive brands in the hamburger industry, there are probably more profound things that we could do together to help support peace. And the story just crashed, because really his real strength would have been to actually, first of all, he didn't suggest anything as an alternative, and lost a huge amount of momentum and was viewed incredibly poorly as a result of that. And McDonald's, Burger King was seen to say, hey, we're bigger than this, we're bigger than the competition, and we can set the bar high, but McDonald's just slid into the background and nobody heard anything more about it. It was debated extensively. Everybody had an opinion on it, but in the grand scheme of things, there was no doubt that Burger King won in this awareness battle over McDonald's, due not to the actual creative idea, but the response by McDonald's to Burger King. Okay, trend 3, owning your narrative. really, I think one of the biggest elements of what is happening for brands is the ability for them to self-publish. So owning their own story, but actually owning their own content and developing it. We're seeing more and more brands. I probably do not work with any brand who has not some form of content site. And that's everything from as basic as streaming news on their own website through to creating their own content sites, where they actually have to operate almost like an old-fashioned newsroom. So the most effective way to do this is actually to develop an editorial team, really looking at what is news to that company, and how do we communicate it in a way that doesn't sound like marketing speak, but actually taking their very complex news often to their customers and to their key stakeholders, but through their own voice and through their own lens. We, as an agency, we're looking at this as a trend in terms of where our clients were going in the owned space, and we were hiring one by one people to develop campaigns on behalf of clients, and finding that it really wasn't working and we weren't gaining traction. So last year we actually acquired a content firm in London. It's 60 people, and their original premise was they only hired journalists, and so not only now do they have a vast team of journalists on staff, but in addition to that they have their storytellers. So they've created really strong video components to their capability, as well as graphic design. And so, as I said, right now this is probably one of the fastest areas of growth within Text100, and so is very much a clear reflection of where paid, owned, earned, and social is going. In terms of one of the best examples, if you want to look at this, it's GE. GE Reports is an owned platform that GE developed, and given the complexity of GE's message, because it's across automotive, healthcare, aerospace, science, they wanted to create a platform where they would not just talk about themselves but also talk about competitors, but through the lens of innovation. And they also monitor the degree of traction that they get on this site and how much it gets picked up. This is one of their most successful stories, which is on LED lighting, GE lighting, helping farming of lettuces in Japan. And I think it's probably these photographs that were the things that most drove the pickup, just because of the fascination of the science of these stories. But in terms of monitoring bounce rates and monitoring engagement, they had over 600,000 views of the owned site themselves. It went viral, and the social pickups were extraordinary in the amount of shares, but they also put on their platform shareable content, the ability to actually pick something up, tweet it, and share it very, very easily. Traditional media also picked up on it. The story ran in Wired, and it ran in the Huffington Post, and a number of what would be considered journalistic channels. And most importantly, from GE's point of view, they had over 90 business leads as a result of a story that they ran on their own platform. Okay, my last trend. What's the future role of the Chief Marketing Officer, and how is it evolving? As I said at the outset, I think it's a fantastic time to be in this industry, and I think we can only assume that there will be more and more change. What we're seeing with clients is that the hierarchy and the structure of marketing is breaking down entirely. So while I think our holy grail had been to sit at the C-suite level, to engage and consult with CEOs and sit along our colleagues in the financial department and the operating department, we're seeing that all change. And so what's happening now is that a CMO is really sitting at the center, given that all of these people are actually key stakeholders. As I said, they are brand ambassadors in their own right. So my premise, and a number of companies are looking at their role not as the Chief Marketing Officer, but as the Chief Integration Officer. Gartner has published recently that by 2017, CMOs will spend more budget on technology than the CTO will, because technology will be such a core component of what they're doing. In the HR department, unless you have your people on board internally to communicate your message and your narrative, then you will not be successful, because those guys are the ambassadors on a day-to-day basis of your brand. But marketing itself and the marketing departments are changing. As I said earlier, we work with IBM, and my client is John Iwata. He was the chief communications officer worldwide for IBM, and when Ginny Rometty took over, he was appointed as chief marketing officer. And one of the first things that he did was look at, he was in charge of marketing, advertising, and communications on behalf of the brand. And one of the first things he did was to look at how do I reorganize my departments, because he was probably one of the most progressive people in terms of thinking where the future of marketing was going. So he took 100 of his top leaders together in a conference space in New York and set out tables which really had the specific campaigns that were most important to IBM, you know, the future of cloud, where was cognitive computing going, and so on, and built campaigns around each of the tables. Then he asked the 100 leaders that were in the room, marketing, advertising, communications, PR, forget your skill set and forget what you do on a day-to-day basis. Pick a campaign that you're most passionate about and go to that table, and we're going to work on it. And what ended up happening on the table I went to is there was ad guys, there was PR folks, there was marketing people. But we had almost self-selected based on our passion where we were going to sit. And then we worked together and built campaigns. So when he went back to his own department, he broke down all of the walls. So he doesn't have departments that are called marketing, PR, or IT, or communications anymore. Now his whole focus is what skill set do I need to drive the campaign that's most relevant to the future of IBM's brand position. And so that led us also to think within Text100 about what kind of people we're hiring. And so we've adopted this notion that anybody we hire T-shaped individuals. And the T is meant to just represent, you know, what specific skill set do I major in? You know, what am I a specialist in? And then can I become a generalist in the marketing and communications function as a result? And so the kind of people that we're hiring today, and I think our clients will be hiring in the future, actually are behavioralists. They're anthropologists. They're people who are videographers. They may be creative directors, but an entirely different set of skills than the ones that I would have traditionally said. So, you know, it's interesting from a marketing education and academic point of view how you train people for this new world, because I actually believe that coming out of marketing, you're going to have a specialization in one specific area, be a T-shaped person, have a broad understanding of marketing, but take an area or a skill set that is very relevant and fast growing, because those are the kind of people that I think will be hired to coalesce around specific campaigns that they're passionate about. So, in summary then, my 4 key trends. Attention economy, integration, integrated marketing is going to be key. Common narrative across all platforms. Cutting through the noise and the opportunity to newsjack on other stories that are going on. Own your own content and your own narrative. Content will be key. I see no way other than huge growth in self-publishing of brands. And then welcome to the new CMO, the Chief Integration Officer. Thank you very much.